This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and good times. This is a fun one. This is the 2016 Razer Blade, a 14-inch gaming laptop that's not much bigger than a 13-inch Retina MacBook Pro. Inside we have NVIDIA GTX 970M graphics, 6 gigs of DDR5 VRAM, quad-core Intel 6th generation CPU, QHD Plus touchscreen too, and of course the Razer Chroma keyboard. Crazy light shows you can do with that. In fact, you could just spend a day playing with that. But better yet, play some really good games. And we're going to do that in this review too, because we're going to look at it now. This relatively tiny laptop has no business being so fast. In fact, it's quicker than some 15 and 17-inch gaming laptops. As Intel Skylake 6th generation Core i7-6700HQ clocked at 2.6 gigahertz, so that's a fast 45-watt CPU. 16 gigs of RAM is standard, as is a PCIe NVMe SSD, the fast kind. 4.3 pounds, which is 1.95 kilograms, and it's 0.7 inches thin. It's really diminutive here, this 14-inch laptop. Also standard is a high-resolution QHD Plus Sharp IGZO touchscreen. Killer 1535 wireless AC, that's second generation. Really excellent networking there. And a 2-megapixel webcam, so you can look your most beautiful when you're doing Twitch. Externally, the design has not changed from the last generation. That's not really a bad thing because it's still a really good-looking, well-made laptop. Unibody aluminum design here, matte black painted finish, tidy types, get your cleaning cloths ready. This will show fingerprints like mad. A damp cloth is the best way to clean it off. Even if you just use a microfiber cloth without any liquid, it's kind of hard to get off the fingerprint oil. Oh, well, the price we pay for a trendy matte black look. The Razer snake logo, of course, is here, and you can control whether that's backlit or not, so you're not too out there when you go to work and are sitting in a meeting and you have the glowing Razer. You can turn that thing off. Sculpted, MacBook-like. You can see the cutout there for lifting up the lid, very much like Apple's, and the straight sides with the gentle curves right here. I know some of you love it, some of you hate it when I compare this to Apple products, but in this case, the resemblance is pretty strong other than the color. And of course, the lid is their own. They have the twin creases over here and their logo, and that makes it different. And the bottom side is a little less tidy than Apple because, you know, Apple hates vents. We have vents here. Vents are a good thing, in my opinion. Forget about prettiness here. We need ventilation. And when you've got a quad-core CPU and an high-end NVIDIA GPU in here, you need some cooling. This is very rigid. It's affixed with Torx T5 screws, only the exposed ones, nothing hidden under the rubber feet like HP does. Hello, HP, stop doing that. So it's pretty easy to take off the bottom cover, no fiddly plastic clips. Once you get inside, you have access to the M2 PCIe SSD slot. The RAM is soldered on, all 16 gigs soldered on there. You have a socketed killer Wi-Fi card. It's a really good Wi-Fi card. I can't see why anybody would want to replace that card. It's good stuff. And of course, you have access to the battery inside. One thing I did notice, this is a very rigid bottom overall, but if you press right over here, it may actually hit the fan cage underneath and make some noise. Now, I noticed because I picked it up sort of like this to carry it around. Well, don't do that, because you'll hear it go, and you'll think, oh my God, what did I do to it? Got some super grippy, rubbery feet over here. Boy, are they grippy. They hold onto the table. They also hold onto dirt and lint. Again, tidy types won't like it. The laptop is very light at 4.3 pounds, but since it's only a 14-inch footprint, it feels really dense when you pick it up. I suppose dense in a good kind of way. Ports, reasonably good for a machine of this size. You got HDMI right here. We have a USB 3.0 port and a USB-C 3.1 Gen 2 / also Thunderbolt 3 port. Obviously, this would work with the Razer Core, although Razer told me they really intend the Core more for the stealth, because you already have pretty high-end graphics inside. So the frame rate jumps for today's graphics cards might not be so much. Now, with the 1080 just out now, maybe that's going to be changing soon. But anyway, it works with any USB-C peripheral and all of the very few Thunderbolt 3 products that are out now. Besides the Core, there's a couple of docks that add on all sorts of ports, like DisplayPort, HDMI, USB, all those things, Ethernet in one docking station. So it's a forward-looking machine. And that's where you plug in the charger. I'll show you the charger later. It's really miraculously small given how high wattage it is. You cannot charge this over Thunderbolt 3. You know, with other laptops you could, but the problem here is that the wattage requirements are very high for this, given the quad-core CPU and the 970M graphics. It's a 165 watt charger, and typically you get 100 to 120 watts out over Thunderbolt 3/USB-C. So you're actually going to have to use the charger. It's, to me, not the end of the world, but 2 more USB 3.0 ports in Razer Green here, and this is your headphone jack. Now, in previous generation Razers, some people had problems with this port being unreliable with the amount of power it puts out. That's the one that does sleep and charge. I haven't had any problems with it so far. I've had hard drives connected to it and other things that it would be pretty obvious if they were coming and going, and it's behaved so far. The laptop has stereo speakers flanking the keyboard, always a bright place to put it instead of facing down at the desk. And they're pretty loud and rich and full for a 14-inch laptop. I was playing Far Cry 4 and actually just enjoying using the built-in speakers rather than plugging in external audio. It's pretty nice, and it sounds better than the Stealth, the little Ultrabook, though. Of course, the Stealth is even tinier at 12.5 inches, so not much room. The display, well, that hasn't changed a whole lot either. This is the same Sharp IGZO QHD Plus 3200 by 1800 pixel glossy touchscreen that Razer's been using for a while. I don't even know if there's an updated version of the 14-inch panel. We know, obviously, Dell's been using 15-inch panels and 13.3-inch panels in the XPS lines. Who knows? But at any rate, by using the existing panel, probably it's a way that Razer was able to bring the price down by several $100s. I won't complain. It is not perfection, but it is a very pleasing display for content creators. So let's start with what's good about the display. It is bright, and typical of Sharp IGZO displays, the whites are particularly bright, though. The good thing here is that the white point is actually spot on, 6,500 to 6,600 degrees Kelvin. So it's not a harsh, eye-tiring, overly blue-white. Color gamut is very good on this. Full sRGB coverage, 75% of Adobe RGB, which is typical of machines at the high end, though the Dell XPS 15 with the 4K display option does beat it. 304 nits of brightness measured by a Spider 4 Pro colorimeter, which is a hardware device you plug in the USB port to measure it. All that stuff is great. The color calibration from the factory is quite good. It comes pre-calibrated. It's wonderful for content creation, thus color accuracy, the pleasing neutral whites, that sort of thing, which personally I would pick because I do photos, I do video. But contrast is still not really high on this 380 to 1, and that's because it has a fairly high black level of 0.79 at max brightness. Now, at lower brightness levels, that does improve, and it goes down to as low as 0.10. But still, the black levels are high on it. So for those of you who play games that are in dark settings, literally cave crawling, that sort of thing, for movie consumption versus creation, if you watch a lot of movies with dark scenes likewise, you'll miss some detail in the blacks, is what it means. So we would love to see that improve. Also, viewing angles. There's glare here. It's actually pretty well managed, though, for a glossy display. But viewing angles are okay on this, but there's color shift as you move along. This is not like an IPS display where there's virtually no color shift. This is inherent to the technology IGZOs tend to shift. Response times on this are actually pretty good. They're better than the XPS 15 with IGZO displays. So for those of you who game and hate, tearing look, that sort of thing, it's not bad. Razer updated the keyboard, and it's a little bit like the Stealth, but not in a bad way. The Stealth keyboard, I didn't like that very much. Really short travel. Yeah. This one, it's about 1.3 millimeters of travel, which is like the XPS 15, but very tactile, very precise, very clicky. It feels almost like switches. It's very nice to type on. And I type thousands of words a week. I'm kind of picky about that. I can adapt to various keyboard types, but this is a good keyboard. And they've also expanded the chroma lighting setup. You've got Starfield simulation. You've got fire, of course, the rolling different colors, the flashing one to give you a seizure if you like, and then the ones that are programmable for game type, RTS, first-person shooter, that sort of thing, or you can do your own stuff. And this uses Razer Synapse. If you already use Razer peripherals, you're familiar with that, so you can set up all sorts of stuff here with your keyboard in terms of customization. So let's take a look at some of the lighting effects that are available. This is actually my favorite. This one comes as a download when you do the updates. This is called Fire because, well, I like this because it keeps all the keys lit, and it's kind of a, minimalist but entertaining one. There is spectrum cycling, which just goes through a bunch of different colors. There's reactive, there's breathing, which is kind of creepy. Here's starlight. Ooh, so you can play with these, till the cows come home. There's a whole lot of things. There's a wave, there's a ripple. Okay, now there's one that can give you a seizure, but it looks pretty cool. So how about performance? Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room first. This is a small and thin gaming laptop with a very powerful GPU, one that's significantly faster than what's in the Dell XPS 15 and the Asus ZenBook Pro UX 501, the Dell Inspiron 7559 Gamer we recently reviewed. Those all have the NVIDIA GTX 960M. The 970M is a big step up, and you'll see in the benchmark graph we're going to present you with in a minute, but it gets hot, it gets loud when it's gaming. It reaches in this area right over here, where fortunately you don't have to touch, and the corresponding area on the underside, about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything above human body temperature feels hot. It's not as bad as the MSI Ghost Pro GS60 we reviewed that actually hit 142. I mean, that will fry the hair off your legs. You don't need to shave anymore. It's crazy. MSI has brought those temperatures down too with newer generation CPUs. That was a 4th generation machine. But anyway, you'll hear it. It will be toasty. It'll be loud when you're gaming. If you're using this just to stream video off Netflix or Amazon Prime, if you're doing Word, Excel, social networking, YouTube, that sort of thing, the fans on quad-core machines are always on, but they're very quiet. So I don't think anybody would call that obtrusive. If you're doing video editing, they'll come on and they'll get warm. It won't get nearly as hot and loud. So mostly it's gaming. And honestly, this thing can go up to 85 degrees centigrade for the CPU and not throttle thermally. 100 degrees is the allowable max, so that's actually safe and fine. A lot of people worry about throttling. We don't have to worry about that here. A lot of people also worry about the fact the machine might kill itself with heat. That's what throttling prevents. The CPU and the GPU will cut back in speed before it'll fry either of them. What really is the vulnerable point is the battery under here. So if the machine is running constantly hot, the battery can actually deform. That sometimes happens with laptops. I'm not saying it's going to happen here, but if you're really worried about your skinny, expensive laptop when gaming, just put a laptop cooler underneath it, or even a magazine between you and the legs to not block the fans, and it'll be fine. It's not going to ever kill itself. But back to benchmark numbers. PC Mark 8 score here, 3250. That's a perfectly respectable number. PC Mark 8 takes, this is a home accelerated test, takes a look at the storage systems, the memory, all this sort of thing. It's, it's not really the most useful benchmark anymore, I have to say, because dual core ultrabooks with integrated graphics often score as high as machines like this, and that's just kind of not right. 3D Mark, however, is a much better test here, and you can see our Firestrike score of 6485, considerably above the Dell XPS 15 with the 960M. And for the 3D Mark CloudGate score, you can see here 20,049, a very respectable number. And for the older 3D Mark 11 here, performance mode, 9,202. Very good there. Now, numbers well above, again, the XPS 15, the Asus ZenBook Pro UX 501, and just slightly below the MSI GS40 Phantom, which is also a 14-inch gaming laptop with the 970M quad-core CPU that weighs even less, 3.5 pounds. Now, it doesn't have that kind of chic unibody, sturdy aluminum thing going on, but you can save some money, and it's a matte 1080p display. That's how they save some weight there. But for Geekbench 3, this just measures CPU performance, and these are typical numbers for a quad-core Skylake i7, and this has the i7-6700 HQ, base clock speed of 2.6 gigahertz, 16 gigs of RAM, all day, all night, DDR4 soldered on board. That is not upgradable, but I think most people are fine with 16 gigs. That's plenty of RAM. The SSD on this is a PCIe NVMe SSD. That means the newest, fastest kind of SSD, though among NVMe SSDs, there are still some that are even faster, like the Samsung 950 Pro. This has a Samsung SSD in it though, and the only difference between the base $19.99 model and the $21.99 model is the size of the SSD, the capacity. The base is 256 gigs. The more expensive one has 512 gigs, which we have here. And you can see our numbers, which are par for the course for the SSD being used here. And again, if you really want faster performance, you could upgrade to the Samsung 950 Pro, but really in real world use, you're going to be hard pressed to feel the difference. It's good performance there. Now here I've highlighted the important differences. The CPU is pretty much the same on all these machines, but you can see the difference between the 960M and 970M graphics here in the two graphics benchmarks. And here we have the lone standout in the CPU department. That's the Surface Book Core i7, but that's a dual core. So notice Geekbench 3 measures CPU performance, and it has half the cores of the other machines in this graph. And now we're in Far Cry 4, which, by the way, you know, games take up a lot of space. Say you want to get the 256 gig SSD model. I'm running the game off of the Samsung T3 drive right here using the USB-C cable. So that's pretty neat right there. You can actually install games to an external SSD over a fast USB 3 connection. Someday there'll be Thunderbolt 3 too. Anyway, the game's pretty quick. So graphics quality, very high in Far Cry 4. Additional quality settings, mostly very high. Pretty good, right? So let's see how this plays. And we have Fraps running so you can see the frame rates, and I'm leaving the audio on so you can hear the speakers, which are also pretty good. So here we are. Look at those frame rates, right? Really very good. And let's do Outpost Master run just so you can see a little bit of shooting and crazy stuff like that. And it's going to do very well. And those speakers are sounding pretty darn good too, which is a good thing. So it can drown out the fan audio. Let's see how stealthy I can be. Whoops. Those are excellent frame rates of these quality settings. Oh, those dudes never die, do they? Also good audio quality right there. That's Far Cry 4. And now, for a little antisocial personality disorder moment, we have GTA 5 up here, and you can see the graphics settings. Once again, we're playing at 1920 by 1080. These mobile GPUs really don't have the sauce to play at, 3K resolution. We do, however, have plenty enough VRAM here to actually allow it to pay attention to limits, something I often have to turn off. And there's our advanced settings. All right, we're driving. Nothing too bad's happening so far. Frame rates are good. That wasn't so good, was it? Let's get back on track here again. So very nice, very smooth. GTA 5 is a very demanding game. And again, you can hear the game audio easily above the fans, even though the fans are pretty loud. So how about the charger and battery life and all that good stuff? 70 watt-hour battery inside. That's bigger than certainly an Ultrabook battery, which typically is around 46 watts or so. But there are obviously gaming laptops with bigger batteries. XPS 15 has a bigger battery option, but XPS 15 is a 15.6-inch laptop. This is a 14-inch laptop, less room. The charger. This is the most compact 165-watt charger I have seen. So far, it's a little bit smaller than even the XPS 15's 120-watt charger, and we need all this wattage to drive the 970M. It gets warm when it's charging and you're gaming. It doesn't get burning hot, but it looks good, and it has Razer as usual. We got the rubber cord section, and we have this nice braided cord, and we have the Leather Daddy Love bracelet here with the man nipple on it, so if you want to keep your cord tidy, you can do all that. So does battery life suck? I mean, gaming laptops, especially small ones, usually not promising. And this has a high-resolution display. You got a high-resolution touchscreen on top of that high-end GPU and CPU. Can't be good, can it? Well, they have improved battery life, just like they improved cooling by reworking the fans and the heat pipes a bit. And Skylake helps because it is more power efficient. And of course, this has switchable graphics. You can use the Intel HD 530 that integrated graphics via NVIDIA Optimus. It auto switches pretty intelligently. Anyway, long story short is it's surprisingly good for a gaming laptop of this class, about 6 hours for productivity and streaming full HD video. And that's at 40% brightness with Wi-Fi on and active. And 40% brightness is pretty bright on this. It's not suffering at all with that. In fact, there are times when I've actually made it 6.5 hours and a little bit over. Word, Excel, email, YouTube, web browsing, some Adobe Photoshop, and streaming Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. Now, if you're using this for HD video editing, full HD, or even higher resolution on the road, you'll get shorter battery life. You can call it, say, 4 hours, depending on how much time you're spending actually exporting that video, rendering the video, and how long it is. And obviously, if you're gaming, really a lot shorter. It's always better to be plugged in, if you can, when gaming. And it would depend on the game, too. But you could go down as low as 2.5 to 3 hours if you're gaming with something crazy like GTA 5 on this. So overall, it's very, very good laptop for both pro apps and for gaming. Anything you throw at it, it can handle. And battery life is actually pretty decent when you're doing your businessman or businesswoman on the road kind of typical work. It's not too flashy looking. It doesn't get hot unless you're gaming. It's really pretty good stuff. And it should be for this price, shouldn't it? Let's face it. So that's a 2016 Razer Blade, available now. Obviously a high-end laptop with a price tag to match, but thankfully, they've dropped it several $100s from the previous generation pricing, and now it's pretty price competitive with the Dell XPS 15 and other higher-end, thin and light gaming/pro apps laptop. And I do love this thing, both as a pro apps laptop, particularly for Photoshop and video editing, and also for gaming. It really has impressed me that it's holding up nicely. And I have an MSI GT72 Dominator Pro, so 980M and that. Honestly, I'm not missing it all when I play games on this. It's that capable. You have to be able to live with the fans, though, and the heat. That's always the story with these really thin and light laptops. Not any hotter than anybody else, not any louder than anybody else in this size range. And believe me, there's not a lot of competition in this size range, but still,